Welcome back, everyone. So, our topic for today is the lyric and its variant forms. So, let's get started with the lyric. Now, what exactly is a lyric? In poetry, there are different styles. Some poems are called epic or narrative poems. These are like movies. They tell a very long story. They have heroes, villains, battles, and adventures. But a lyric is not a story. So, what is it? A lyric is a relatively short poem where a single speaker simply says their personal thoughts, deep feelings, and private emotions. Think of it this way: when you read a narrative poem, you are watching an action movie, but when you read a lyric, you are looking through a window straight into the poet's heart and mind. It's just one person telling you exactly how they feel. Now you must be wondering, why is it called a lyric? So let's take a quick time travel trip back to ancient Greece. So thousands of years ago, people didn't have printed books to sit and read silently in a library. Instead, poets would stand in front of an audience and sing their poems. While singing, they would play a small, beautiful stringed instrument like a tiny harp or guitar called a lyre. Because these poems were sung to the music of the lyre, people started calling them lyrics. And over the centuries, poets stopped playing the physical instrument, but the poems kept the name. More importantly, they kept the beautiful musical song like quality. Now, key characteristics of a lyric. The first one is subjectivity. Subjectivity simply means personal. The lyric is all about the poet. The poet will use words like I, my, and mine. It is a direct reflection of the poet's own mood. The second one is a single emotion. A lyric does not confuse you with 20 different feelings, okay? It focuses on one powerful emotion from the first line to the very last line. So, if the poem is about passionate love, it stays about love. And if it is about extreme sadness, it stays sad. It revolves around that one single feeling. Now, the third one is brevity. Brevity just means being brief or short. So, why must a lyric be short? Because human beings cannot stay super angry or super excited for a very long time, right? Extreme emotion pass quickly. So, the poem captures that quick, intense feeling and ends before the feeling fades away. Now, the fourth one is musicality and melody. Remember the ancient lyre? Okay, because of its musical history, a lyric sounds like a song. Poets use rhyming words and a smooth rhythm so that when you read it out loud, it flows beautifully like music. Now, the last one is spontaneity. Spontaneity means doing something naturally and instantly without overthinking. A great lyric feels completely natural. It feels as if the poet was suddenly struck by a powerful feeling and just poured their heart out onto the paper without worrying too much about strict grammar rules. Now, let's look at a very famous example that you might have heard of in school: Daffodils by William Wordsworth. In this poem, Wordsworth is just taking a walk when he suddenly sees a beautiful field of golden flowers called daffodils. And seeing them fills him with a sudden burst of pure joy and peace. He does not tell a long story about how he got there, he just expresses that single emotion of happiness. It is deeply personal, it is short, and it is highly musical. It is the perfect lyric. Now, types of lyric. There are two main types of lyric. The first one is the personal lyric. This is exactly what it sounds like. The poet is talking about their own private life, their own intimate feelings, and their own broken heart. It is all about them, like a romantic love poem. And the second one is the impersonal lyric. In this type, the poem is still full of strong emotions, but the poet is looking outward. Instead of writing about their private life, they write about a public event, a great national hero, or a big festival. The emotion is still there, but it is said by the whole community and not just the poet. So, a lyric is simply a short musical poem where one person expresses a single deep emotion. Now, let's discuss sonnet. Now, what exactly is a sonnet? A sonnet is just a lyric poem. Its main job is to express a deep personal emotion, usually romantic love. But there is the catch. A poet cannot just write as much as they want. A sonnet has an absolute, unbreakable mathematical rule that it must always be exactly 14 lines long. Not 13 lines, not 15 lines, exactly 14. And now imagine you have to tell someone how much you love them, but you are only allowed to speak exactly 14 sentences. You would have to choose your words very carefully, right? So, this is why the sonnet is considered the ultimate test of a poet's skill. They have to fit a very deep thought into a very tight space. Now, where did it come from? So, the word sonnet comes from an old Italian word, sonetto, which simply means a little song. It was invented in Italy way back in the 13th century by a man named Giacomo da Lentini. However, it was made famous by a superstar Italian poet named Petrarch. Petrarch was madly in love with a woman named Laura, and he wrote hundreds of 14-line sonnets just for her. Years later, in the 16th century, English writers traveled to Italy, read these beautiful little songs, and brought the style back to England. Later, the great William Shakespeare took this style and made it, obviously, perfect. Now comes key characteristics of a sonnet, or the three golden rules of a sonnet. So the first rule is the 14 line rule. It must be exactly 14 lines long. And the second one is iambic pentameter. English sonnets are written in a very specific musical beat. It means every single line has exactly 10 syllables. This beat sounds exactly like a human heartbeat. One soft beat followed by one loud beat. It sounds like this: da dum, da dum, da dum, da dum, and da dum. And the rule number 3 is the volta. This is the magic trick of the sonnet. Volta means a sudden turn or shift. A good sonnet does not just say the same thing for 14 lines. Somewhere in the middle, the poem will suddenly change its mood or the thought. For example, the first half might talk about a sad problem, and then the volta happens, and the second half gives a happy answer for a twist. Let's talk about types of sonnets. So, there are many types of sonnets, but these three are the most important. The first one is the Petrarchan sonnet, which is also known as the Italian sonnet. This is the original classic form. Petrarch split his 14 lines into two distinct rooms. The octave, the first 8 lines. This part's job is to introduce the problem, ask a question, or show inner conflict. And the rhyme scheme is usually A B B A B B A. The sestet, the final 6 line. This part provides the solution or the peaceful reflection. The rhyme scheme is usually CDE CDE or CDC CDC. Now, where is the volta? The plot twist happens right in the middle, perfectly dividing the poem after line 8. Now, the second one is the Shakespearean sonnet, which is also known as the English sonnet. So, when the sonnet came to England, poets realized that English words don't rhyme as easily as Italian words. So, Shakespeare perfected a new format. He split the 14 lines into 4 parts, 3 quatrains. 4 plus 4 plus 4 is equals to 12 lines. A quatrain is just a stanza with 4 lines. Okay, in this 12 lines, Shakespeare slowly built up an idea. And one final couplet. A couplet is 2 lines. This is the grand finale. It gives a super strong conclusion or a massive twist. And rhyme scheme is A B A B C D C D E F E F G Z. Now, where is the volta? It usually happens right at the end, just before that final 2-line couplet. Okay. Now the third one is the Spenserian sonnet, developed by a poet named Edmund Spenser. He liked Shakespeare's sonnet, but he wanted his poem to sound smoother, so he linked the rhyme schemes together like a chain. A B A B B C B C C D C D E E. Now, there are a few other variations like the Miltonic sonnet, which is like the Italian one but does not have a hard break in the middle, and modern sonnets, where rebel poets today break all the traditional rules just to experiment. Now, let's look at the famous examples. William Shakespeare's Sonnet 18, the famous poem that starts with "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" In the first 12 stanzas, lines, the quatrains, Shakespeare talks about how summer is too hot, too short, and eventually fades away. But then the twist in his final 2 lines, the couplet, he says, "But your beauty will never fade because I am writing this poem about you, and this poem will live forever." Another example is John Milton's On His Blindness. Milton used the Italian Petrarchan style. In his first 8 lines, octave, he is very sad and angry because he has gone completely blind. He asks God, "How can I work for you if I can't see?" Then the volta happens. In the final 6 lines, sestet, he finds peace, realizing that God does not just need hard workers. God also loves those who patiently wait and bear their burdens. Now let's discuss an ode. Now, what exactly is an ode? So, ode is a poem of high praise. It is the longest, most serious, and most dignified form of lyric poetry. Whenever a poet looks at something and thinks, "Wow, this is the most incredible, powerful thing in the world, and I must praise it," they write an ode. Poets use odes to glorify a great historical hero, celebrate a massive war victory, or praise the infinite beauty of nature, like the wind, a season, or a bird. Okay, it is a poem that essentially says a giant thank you or wow to its subject. Now, where did the ode come from? Just like the word lyric, the ode was born in ancient Greece. The word comes from the old Greek word oid, which literally means to sing or chant. Now, I want you to close your eyes and imagine a massive outdoor stadium, kind of like the Olympics today. In ancient Greece, odes were huge public events. When an athlete won a game, they didn't just get a medal. A massive group of singers and dancers called a chorus would get on a stage and perform an ode to celebrate the winner. It was loud, musical, and full of action. Now, key characteristics of an ode. The first one is high seriousness. An ode never jokes around. So you won't find odes about silly or common topics. The subject matter is always majestic, highly intellectual, and deeply serious. And the second one is grand language. Because the topic is so great, the language must be great too. The poet uses very rich, decorated vocabulary and complex figure of speech. It sounds almost like a king or queen giving a royal address. The third one is direct address or epistrophe. This is a very important term. Epistrophe in poetry means talking directly to something that isn't human, as if it can hear you. Okay, an ode usually begins by speaking directly to the object. For example, instead of saying the wind is blowing, the poet will shout, "Oh wind, west wind, hear me." Next characteristics is extended length. Because the poet is exploring very deep philosophical ideas and giving so much praise, an ode needs a lot of room. It is generally much longer than a standard lyric or a sonnet. Now, types of odes. The first one is the Pindaric ode, regular or Greek ode. It is named after an ancient Greek poet named Pindar. Remember how I said odes were performed by a singing and dancing chorus? Pindar made strict rules for their dance moves. The poem was divided into three parts. The strophe, the chorus sings while dancing to the left. And the antistrophe, here the chorus sings while dancing back to the right. And the epode, the chorus stands perfectly still in the center of the stage to deliver the final powerful thought. Second type is the Horatian ode, also the Roman ode. It is named after a Roman poet named Horace. Horace didn't care about giant stage dances. His odes were much calmer, quieter, and more philosophical. They were written to be read privately in a room, not shouted in a stadium. They use very regular, repeating stanzas. And the third one is the English ode or the irregular ode. Hundreds of years later, famous English romantic poets like John Keats and William Wordsworth fell in love with the high, serious tone of ode. However, they hated the strict Greek dancing rules, so they rebelled. They created irregular odes where the length of the stanzas and the rhyming words change freely depending on how the poet's emotion shift. Now let's look at the famous examples. Ode to the West Wind by P.B. Shelley. Shelley looks at the fierce autumn wind. He praises its terrifying power because it destroys all the dead autumn leaves. But at the same time, it spreads new seeds so the spring can arrive later. He is praising nature's power of life and death. Now, the another example is John Keats' Ode on an Grecian Urn. Here, Keats is literally just looking at an ancient clay pot and urn in a museum. But because it's an ode, he thinks very deeply about it. He praises the beautiful painting on the pot, realizing that while real human beings grow old and die, the beautiful art painted on this pot will stay young and perfect forever. Now we will look at the another variant of the lyric, the elegy. Now, what exactly is an elegy? Think about the opposite of a birthday party or a grand celebration. An elegy is a deeply moving poem that focuses strictly on mourning, sorrow, and lamentation, which are just fancy words for deep sadness and crying over someone who has passed away. Okay? It is a poetic tribute. Just like you might write a heartfelt goodbye letter to someone you lost, a poet writes an elegy to express profound grief over the death of a specific person, like a family member or best friend or a great public leader. Sometimes it's even written to reflect on how short and fragile human life is in general. Now, where did it come from? Let's travel back to ancient Greece and Rome now. Back then, the word elegy, from the Greek word elegia, did not automatically mean a poem about death. In ancient times, elegy just referred to the rhythm or the beat of the poem. They called it the elegiac meter, which was a falling, slow, and mournful sounding rhythm. Ancient poets used this rhythm to write about all sorts of sad things: losing a war, getting your heart broken by a lover, or deep philosophy. However, as time passed and English literature evolved, especially during the Renaissance period, the rules changed. The definition became very narrow. Today, when we say elegy in literature, we don't care about the rhythm anymore. It is defined strictly by its topic. It must be a poem of mourning for the dead. Now, key characteristics of an elegy. The first one is melancholic tone. The mood is 100% serious, sad, and reflective. You will not find any jokes or light-hearted humor here. And the second one is the three stages of grief. This is very important. A masterpiece elegy takes the reader on a psychological journey of healing. It does not just stay sad the whole time, it moves in three steps. The first step is lamentation, the shock, okay? The problem starts with raw crying, shock, and the unbelievable pain of losing the person. And the second one is praise. The second step is praise, the memories. Then the tears dry just as little bit, and the poet starts remembering the dead person. They praise their kindness, their achievements, and what made them so special. And the third stage is consolation, the peace. Finally, the poem ends on a note of comfort. The poet accepts that death is a natural part of universe, or they find peace in believing their loved one is in heaven. Another characteristic is philosophical universalization. This simply means the poem starts small and goes big. It starts by crying for one specific person, but by the end, it makes the poet ask big questions about everyone. Why must human beings die? What is the purpose of our short lives? Now let's talk about types of elegy. The first one is the pastoral elegy, also the pretend setting. This is a highly artificial traditional style. The word pastoral means relating to shepherds and villages. The shepherd mask. The poet puts on a costume. They pretend that they are simple village shepherd, and they pretend the dead person was also a fellow shepherd. Crying nature of pathetic fallacy. This is a great term to learn. Pathetic fallacy is when the poet imagines that nature has human feelings. In this poem, the trees, the rivers, and the sheep are actually crying and drooping in sadness over the dead shepherd. Greek myths. The poet will look at the sky and ask ancient Greek water fairies or gods, like, where were you? Why didn't you save my friend? For example, John Milton's Lycidas, which he wrote to mourn his college friend. And the second one is the personal or subjective elegy, the real setting. This one is direct, raw, and real. No fake mask. The poet takes off the seabird costume. They don't pretend to be in a village. They speak directly from their own bleeding heart, showing their real private sadness for a specific family member or friend who actually died. For example, Alfred Lord Tennyson in Memoriam AHH, he wrote this massive poem to deal with his real life depression after his absolute best friend author died suddenly. And the third one is the impersonal or general elegy. It's mourning for everyone. In this type, the poet isn't crying for one specific best friend or a famous king. They are mourning for everyone. Universal death. The poet thinks deeply about human life and how death comes for every single person. They mourn the ordinary common people who lived quiet lives and were forgotten by the world. For example, Thomas Gray's Elegy written in a country churchyard. In this famous poem, the poet is standing in a quiet village graveyard as the sun goes down. He looks at the graves of the poor, uneducated farmers and cries for them, thinking if these poor farmers had been given schools and money, they could have been great leaders or famous poets. Now let's look at the another variant of the lyric, that is the ballad. What is the ballad? Simply, ballad is a short, thrilling story told in the form of a song. It acts as a magical bridge. It takes the storytelling part from narrative poetry, like having characters and a plot, and mixes it with the musical part of the lyric poetry. Before movies, before Netflix, and before novels, the ballet was how everyday people entertained themselves with amazing stories. Now, where did it come from? The word ballad actually comes from an old Latin word, ballare, which means to dance. Let's travel back to the Middle Ages. Imagine you are an ordinary villager or a farmer. You don't know how to read or write. After a long, hard day of working in the fields, what do you do for fun? You gather your friends around a warm village fire, you sing stories, and you dance. Because these villagers could not write their stories down on paper, the songs had to be memorized. They were passed down orally by word of mouth, okay? From grandparents to parents to children over hundreds of years. Because of these massive games of historical telephone, nobody knows who the original author of the oldest ballads are. They are completely anonymous. Now let's look at the key characteristics of a ballet. The first one is narrative storytelling. It always tells a story, and because it was meant to entertain the village, the themes are always highly dramatic. We are talking about tragic love affairs, bloody murders, brave knights, spooky ghosts, and magical fairies. And the second one is abrupt opening. Abrupt means sudden. A ballad does not waste time with a long, boring introduction describing the weather. It jumps straight into the middle of the action to grab the audience attention instantly. And the third one is simple language. Remember, this was created by uneducated villagers, right? Not university professors and all. So the language is very basic and uses everyday vocabulary. You won't find any super complex philosophy or confusing metaphors here. The fourth one is objective tone. This is an important term. Objective means the narrator acts like a security camera. They just show you the action happening, but they hide their professional feelings. Even if a character dies a tragic death, the narrator won't say, I feel so sad about this. They just tell the story and let you feel the sadness. The fifth one is the refrain, the chorus. This is the most famous feature of the ballad. A refrain is a specific line or a whole stanza that is repeated over and over again after every verse. Think of it exactly like the chorus of your favorite pop song today. This repetition created a hypnotic rhythm and made it super easy for the whole village to memorize the song and sing along together. Now let's talk about types of ballads. The first one is the traditional ballad, also known as folk or popular ballad. These are the oldest ones. These are the original ancient songs passed on by words of mouth around those village fires. Their authors are completely unknown. For example, Sir Patrick Spens, a tragic story about a sailor, and The Wife of Osir's Well, a spooky ghost story. And the another type is the broadside ballad. Fast forward to the 16th century, the printing press was invented. People realized they could make money off these stories. They started printing ballads on cheap single sheets of paper called broadsides. People would sell this on the street for a penny. They acted like the tabloid newspaper of their day, telling sensation, shocking news about recent murders or public execution. And the third one is the literary ballad. Hundreds of years ago, highly educated famous poets looked back at those old village songs and said, "Wow, these are incredibly haunting and beautiful." So, these famous poets started writing their own poems by carefully copying the village style. They used the same simple language, the repeating chorus, and the magical themes. But unlike the old folk ballads, we know exactly who wrote this because they were published in books. Example, when famous poet like John Keats or Ashley Coleridge write a poem that sounds like an ancient village song, this is a literary ballad. Okay, now we are done with the ballad also. So that's it for the video. See you in the next video and don't forget to like, subscribe and share.